solid waste management issues, and water pollution. Over the years, I had the privilege of working across Eastern Europe and many other countries in the global south, helping bridging gaps by developing circular economy principles. These models often rely on innovative public-private partnerships and private sector-led initiatives to create sustainable solutions. So we are continuing the discussion from the earlier panel and moving towards the role of vegetation run by the private sector, corporates, as well as the restoration players. I work currently for the G20 Global Land Initiative, where I focus on a transformative area called the restoration economy. Specifically, my work centers on engaging the private sector in post-mining landscape and post-quarrying restoration. Like my all colleagues here today, I'm also passionate about finding innovative solutions and approaches that just don't rehabilitate degraded land, but also ensure the long-term sustainable use. As highlighted yesterday by our director, Dr. Murali, the scale of degradation caused is staggering. Many of you here today may already know this, but it's worth revisiting quickly the facts. Human activity has degraded nearly 2 billion hectares of land globally. That's about the size of Mexico and India combined. Just imagine the scale of this loss and impacts of ecosystem, food security, and climate resilience. This is the immense challenge we are here to address together. Just to continue on some more facts, agriculture accounts for much of this damage, with approximately 25% of the global arable land degraded due to unsustainable practices like overgrazing, monocropping, and overuse of fertilizers and pesticides. Deforestation has stripped 420 million hectares of forest, reducing biodiversity and exacerbating carbon emissions. Finally, the mining sector has left an additional 10 million hectares of land barren, compounding this issue. As Charles McNeil, one of our speakers yesterday, aptly noted, we are in the midst of a multidimensional crisis. He named it polycrisis. The interconnected breakdown of soil health and water resources, biodiversity, and food systems. These cascading effects disproportionately impact indigenous communities and local populations, threatening livelihood, cultural heritage, and resilience to climate change. Today's panel is not just about highlighting these challenges. It's about exploring solutions, outcomes. Imagine a barren landscape, post-mining, stripped of life, where the soil crumbles and biodiversity fades away. Now, picture that same place thriving with lush vegetation, vibrant wildlife, and resilient ecosystems. That transformation is what we call revegetation. The art and science of bringing life back to degraded land. But it's more than just planting trees. It's about choosing the right plants, protecting the soil, and creating sustainable systems that benefit both nature and local communities. The experts are here. I don't want to take too much from their topics, but just to give an idea, revegetation uses innovative methods like planting native species, combining agriculture with forestry, and even creative solutions like hydroseeding, composting, etc. It's not just about fixing the land. It's about building a future where ecosystems thrive and communities prosper. By reusing resources and embracing sustainable practices, it teaches us a powerful lesson. With the right care and collaboration, we can heal the land and create a land of opportunities. This is why we need solutions that do more than that look good on paper. Restoration practices must make economic sense for companies and communities involved, while still meeting ecological social goals. Let's dig into how we can make this a reality. It's fantastic to have such a diverse group of experts with us today, a blend of private sector leaders from large-scale corporate mining companies to restoration service providers. Let me introduce the first speaker, Mr. Adrian Hagener. Adrian is the director of a leading restoration service provider from Southern Africa. He brings a wealth of experience and insights to the table. A warm welcome, Adrian. Please introduce yourself, and over to you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Dennis. And yes, I just first want to start off by saying thank you very much for the opportunity and also for the privilege for myself and my co-panelists to come and share some thoughts and experiences with you. My name is Adrian. I'm a restoration ecologist by training with about 20 years of experience in the field of practice. I'm a director with a company called Greenco Environmental Projects, and I also serve as a director of the Land Rehabilitation Society of Southern Africa. So I've been part giving some insights into large-scale post-mining rehabilitation project, specifically looking at the role of revegetation in climate change mitigation. Now, I think you'll all agree that rehabilitation and restoration are extremely complex concepts, and my role really is going to be to introduce some of the more foundational aspects that first need to be overcome in these restoration and rehabilitation projects before we can go to, if we can call it, the sort of higher levels of organization, talking about finance, talking about social aspects, etc. So my company, Greenco, we focus on all aspects of the restoration sphere in post-mining, from waste containment to geochemical characterization and those risks that need to be overcome, to geotechnical and hydrological aspects, all the way through then to the eventual revegetation of these highly degraded and disturbed mining landscapes. And the end goal, of course, is always to a sustainable, agreed upon land use. Sound okay? So that land use may be straightforward indigenous restoration to a grazing land use, for example. It may be functional restoration for wetland recreation or ecosystem services. Or it may be agroecological systems, often having to persist alongside heavily contaminated and degraded environments. Or at the other end of the spectrum, of course, it may be restoring for the final goals of dedicated ecosystem restoration with specific biodiversity targets and also specific ecosystem services targets. So although the topic is on revegetation, to move from the one picture to the other, before we can even talk about restoration, we first need to often consider the constraints that were brought about by the degradation in the first place. These constraints may be geochemical, they may be geotechnical, they may be hydrological. But in the context of the current and predicted future climate, we really need to take all of these into consideration before we can actually move from one state to the other. Fortunately, the environmental, the scientific, and the engineering community are really great at developing models and tools and of course constantly refining these to make sure that we have cutting edge technology available. Although the work may be quite complex, getting the buy-in from regulators and from communities that are going to be affected by large-scale restoration programs is absolutely key. And models such as these really make it a bit more real for people to see what it is that's going to protect them from the underlying waste, that's going to ensure that they have clean air, clean drinking water, and biodiverse landscapes post-mining. To give you one or two examples, here's an example of where we try to move from a open cast coal mine, which is effectively just a massively polluting big scar in the ground, to a thriving grassland ecosystem. And in the context of climate change, there are many tools that have been developed, and what we found one of the most useful ones to utilize is called long-term landform evolution modeling. What's great about this is it allows one to actually consider the climatic variables that we may expect in future, and we can alter rainfall periodicity, rainfall intensity, and total volume of rainfall. And we can do this over weeks, months, decades, centuries, or even thousands of years. And we can incorporate this into existing designs and test whether they still are likely to be resistant to erosion and whether they will actually give us something approaching a sustainable landscape at the end of the day. So, I mean, the image there in blue with those pink, purple dots that's actually showing where we would expect areas of erosion and runoff that are going to be beyond threshold that aren't going to be sustainable at the end of the day. And we're able to out-design those before we begin construction. Now, obviously, this is only early days, maybe only 5 years since we've recreated the landscape, but we've been able to successfully move from essentially a big hole in the ground to a thriving grassland ecosystem that has great socioeconomic benefits as well as ecological and ecosystem services. My second example here is to do with geochemistry. So this rather simple looking graph is the downstream result of a series of very complex geochemical models that were run for gold tailings facilities. So as you may know, gold tailings is highly saline, it's highly acidic, it's very heavy metal rich, and often radioactive. And we need to build waste containment layers to actually protect the environment and communities from the impacts of this waste. And then we need to have final cover layers over these, which actually are sustainable and are able to reduce erosion and are able to have thriving ecosystems which give this stability and sustainability over time. And what this graph really shows is that from a salinity perspective, we can actually expect that within 20 years, the soil cover is going to salinize to near threshold levels where most plants actually won't be able to grow and survive anymore. So everything will look really good for the first 20 years, and then like that, vegetation will start to die off, we'll start to have erosion, denudation of the cover, and by then everybody's walked away. So in terms of the revegetation strategy, here we first had to look at getting rapid establishment to bind the soil, and we utilized salt-tolerant grasses that are commercially available, but really just to get very quick cover, reduce erosion, and to just kickstart those nutrient cycling processes, to get some roots in the ground and to get things going. And we had to go through a second stage of revegetation here, which then included relatively shallow rooted but fast growing and high biomass producing shrubs, so that we had high production of leaf mass, which had a very frequent turnover rate. And this then, with the nutrient cycling that had started, was able to really start to build up the organic carbon cycling and total volume in the soil. And as you know, the richer the organic carbon, the more the buffer capacity of the soil to be able to guard against things like rising salinity. So as you can imagine, there's a feedback loop here. We utilize specific revegetation strategies to actually create the conditions that we will be met with at a future date. And this is key, whether it be soil conditions or climate. And this bioengineering function is absolutely critical. Then I guess there are many functions that vegetation has to fulfill in restoration and rehabilitation programs. In every nature-based solution, in every environmental engineering design, vegetation is always the literal last line of defense. When the vegetation fails, the project can be seen to have failed as well. So these are just some of the critical functions that vegetation is required to fulfill. Firstly, it's in terms of binding the soil to reduce wind and water erosion, which is quite straightforward. But very often, the vegetation is required to fulfill hydrological functions as well. So these may be evapotranspiring water to prevent water from entering into underlying waste bodies and creating acidic drainage or impacting regional groundwater. It's also key then, of course, is the vegetation needs to replenish and restore the stocks of soil organic carbon and getting that nutrient cycling going. Fourthly, vegetation needs to provide habitat for fauna and for other flora, not least of which, of course, is the microbial communities that we have to get going. And then lastly, vegetation has to serve the function in terms of ecosystem services for communities. So in order to fulfill all of these functions, it's really essential that we consider the climate change models and what they tell us in terms of the anticipated conditions we may sit with. And this needs to be put against the backdrop about how we manage, how we monitor, and how we maintain these landscapes in order to get the best chance for moving towards sustainability. So I'll sign off with one of my favorite quotes, which I've modified slightly. But effectively, my closing statement is that organic carbon in the soil is the be-all and end-all of restoration programs in mining. This is not always the focus, but it really needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for this insight. Now I move on to the next speaker. That's Mr. Arthur Osthuizen. He's the General Manager, Sustainability of Ivanhoe Mines Group, which has operations in Southern Africa as well as in Central Africa. So Arthur is going to delve into Ivanhoe's innovative approach to mining. Rather than addressing the impacts post-mining, they'll be focusing their approaches alongside the operations. So Arthur, over to you. Please make a quick introduction about yourself and then please.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you for the opportunity. So as Dennis said, I'm Arthur Oosthuizen. I'm the General Manager Sustainability at our Platreef operation that's in Limpopo, Mokopane area in South Africa. From a civil engineer by trade, that's been dragged into the sustainability domain, and very excited where we go in the sustainability domain, and especially with the specialists and technology. I think there's good to come. You know, there's a stigma on mining and the mining effect and what we do, and we're usually the bad guys. But I think with the right attitude, the right resources, we can make a difference, not just in restoration, but in livelihood as a main. All right, so Ivanhoe Mines, you know, we've got our slogan, mining with a greater purpose, and I'm proud to say that this company does that, and it's because we're not scared to make use of new technology, making use of the unknown to the benefit not of just of our operations, but in the communities that we operate in. Just a brief overview of our 4 operations. So we've got currently 4 operations. Western Foreland, that's in the DRC, it's in exploration stage, not operational yet. Then we've got Kamoa Kakula, that's our flagship operation currently, the only one that's in full production and still growing. Then Kapushi, also in the DRC, recently starting up. It's an old mine that we're reviving, and quite proud what the team is achieving there in very difficult conditions. And then Platreef, that's where I'm based, in Limpopo, South Africa, and our plan is to go in operation in Q4 2025. So from a pre-startup, it's where do you start? What do you make, and what do you put in plan? So what's nice is that the UN has got their 10 golden rules, and I mean there they are. I don't want to go through all of them, but what stands out with me is work with the local. Um, you know, choose your site carefully, not just for the best interest of your operation, but also think about the impact on the environment and the communities that you operate in. Um, Learn by doing. Just start. There's a lot of unknown, and we're getting there. And I'm very excited what AI is bringing to our domain. But just start. Start small. Do a phased approach, and I'll show you a bit later what we've done. And then, financially sustainable. There's two parts: is to fund what you want to do, but also that what you do is sustainable. I think that's the important thing is, and especially in our domain where we need investments to grow our projects, is from an investor point of view, is this sustainable? And you need to prove the concept. And that's sometimes where the challenge is, that there's funding out there, but you need to prove the concept to get their buy-in. And then the natural legacy. I mean, the mine has got a lifetime, but the legacy that we want to leave is after our lifetime, is that there's a good environment for the communities to be resilient going forward. So, Ivanhoe Mine's approach to proactive restoration and resilience, minimize mining footprints. I think the mining methods is an important factor, and if you can apply the right mining method, you can minimize your mining footprint. I mean, you can look in the public domain. We want to call our Plat Reef operation the biggest precious metal undeveloped mine. But if you look at our footprint we're going to affect, it's less than 400 hectares just by applying a certain mining method. Then technology, for me, that's a big part, and to minimize the climate-related impacts. Let's make use of that technology and not be afraid to share. We need to share information. I think sometimes we as mining companies feel like, we want to hold what we've got to have the edge on the market. But when it comes to restoration, let's share, because there's a greater cause that we want to achieve. Upholding proactive rather than reactive, I think that helps. If you set ourselves up from the start correctly, it just makes the end goal so much easier. Then focusing on leveraging natural environments for resilience and a sustainable development. I'm quite excited, and I'll speak a bit later on tailings dams and dust control and the new technology and plants that's playing a role now and to assist with dust control. And then biodiversity action plan through all the phases of the project, from initial through development till operational, and to try and have a 10-year plan, not just a 1 or 2, but look at the rolling horizon and work towards that plan. So challenges in our proactive restoration, especially in our areas in the DRC, continually keeping the mining operations dry. But then the bigger challenge there is to ensure that water that's been dewatered is being used correctly for the right cause. Then alternative to that, in the Plat Reef operation, it's very dry, hot, water scarce, and you compete for that natural resource, not just with the community in that area. How do you secure water in a water scarce area to make sure that your operation succeed? So our approach, in all three operations, we found that water is a key element, and there's infrastructure that's dilapidated that we've restored, like boreholes. We've also looked at, revegetation with climate resilient plants. There's some exciting stuff, and I think a previous presenter also said that plants that worked in the area 20 years ago might not be the same because of climate change, but there's resilient plant species that can be utilized. So it's exciting stuff in the forefront there. And also then stormwater control measures. Sometimes because of the influx of communities, people are starting to settle down in flood zones, and then the mine gets blamed, you're flooding us. So in our designs, just to look at, controlling flood and see how we can protect the communities. Then in Platreef, we're very excited to do a dry stack tailings. I think we'll be one of the first on the PGMs. It's a great technology, expensive technology, but a great technology from a safety factor, but also saving water and making sure we close circuit and retrieve as much water as we can, and then also the dust control around the dam. Then refurbishing government-owned wastewater treatment plant. I think it's a long journey. It shows that the concept of government-private sector collaboration can work. This is one of them. Very proud of what we achieved. Our main constraint for our project was to secure water. We battled for about 10 years. In 2018, this opportunity came up, and I'll discuss that a bit later, but it's where private sector stepped in and completed a government-owned project. And then renewable energy, not just for the mine, but on our communities as well, just to make them self-sustainable that we're utilizing. So this is just a view. It's been constructed of our tailings dam. You can see our operation there, our head here is still being constructed, and then the communities that's right around the mine. That makes it so much more of a challenge to work and protect in this area. Just some more photos of that. And what we excited about this is the retrieving water and the water loss through the system. And hopefully in a year, 2 years time, because we're going to start this up next year, is to come and report back on the dust and dust control on this waste facility. Then this is the wastewater treatment plant. So this project was started by the government in 2012, came to a standstill in 2016, and so there was no way for the local municipality to complete this project, and that's where collaboration talks started with us and them, that we need the water and they need this facility to protect their natural resources, especially not right at the back. There's a river, Mogalakwena River, running to protect that resource. So we started this initiative in 2018. We signed the MOU in 2021, and then we started the construction in 2022. It's now operational. It's working. So the grey water that comes out of this operation then gets pumped about 5 kilometers to the mine, and we're using that water, and then the surplus goes back into the ecosystem. We do regular tests. We're proud to say this type of plant usually takes about 3 to 4 or 5 months to get to a standard that you can release the water. We achieved this within 3 weeks. So latest technology, good story to share, and if everybody's interested, they can afterwards just touch base with me. But this is just a proven concept of public sector, government sector combining together, making a restorable solution for our communities. Then just slightly on stormwater management, you can see we've installed drains, attenuation ponds, so that you catch the water in the flood and then release it slowly over time. And it helped a lot, especially with the communities right next to our door, and they're building in the flood lanes, and like I said, you get blamed for building the mine and flooding the communities. Another smart is solar high masts. So this is another initiative we started off, and now the local municipality has approached us because their challenge is they don't have a power network, but they want to provide lighting for the communities at night, as petty crime is one of our biggest issues in the area. And this has created a platform for them to assist. So growing, again, an example of private sector, government working together. Then our second approach, practice, is more on the restoration side and on the softer issues, and that's where we're very proud of our prior projects. Cannot believe the effect that bees has got in the area, and especially on the plant species. So putting a lot of effort in there, not just to produce honey that the locals can sell, but more to restore the ecosystem. And bees play a big part in that. Constructing fish ponds, then also support smart climate agricultural practices in host communities to enhance food security, biodiversity, creating mutual beneficial projects in tandem to ensure circularity for sustainable. An example is our banana plantation. I'll discuss that now, but more so, this is just a photo of our photo projects. A great initiative that they did in the DRC. You'll see the beehive in the tree. Now, one of the biggest challenges for our colleagues there in the DRC is that wood's been used to make charcoal, and charcoal is one of their main income. So put the beehive in the tree, and it protects it in a way that people don't want to cut down the tree. So that's a great initiative. The fish ponds. So we started off with the fish ponds, build it up, regulate the water flow, managed it, and that led to, you'll see the bottom side of the photo is where they then started gardening, and especially maize and that. So it's started with the fish ponds, but it's got a second purpose, providing water for the agricultural use, making it almost a small little ecosystem. And it's with the buy-in that we got here from the communities was great, and they're looking after this and actually expanding this operation and growing the agricultural in the area. Then climate smart, like I said, in Mokopane, we're a water scarce area. To get the concepts out to the local community to do their own little backyard gardens took some time, especially that they need to carry water for 5 kilometers from the source to their house. We started this initiative. It's a 12-hectare concept done by Agriculture. You can see the top left photo. It's a dripper irrigation system where you can feed the plants with 20 liters of water a day. We've also showed them to cover it with shade netting to assist with the evaporation. And this started off small. And again, as I say, just start. We started with 50 gardens. We added 100. And we're adding now another 300. And we want to grow this to 1,000 gardens in our area. And just assist with the restoration, but also assist with the livelihood restoration of the community people in the area. Another great initiative is that we've got the banana plantations in our DRC operation, 11 hectares planted. And right adjacent to that, we started a poultry farming. And the nice collaboration here is that organic fertilizer from the chicken waste has now been used to expand and to grow the ground quality, or the soil quality rather, in our banana plantations. And also creating a closed little ecosystem, making it self-sustainable. So, lessons learned in sustainability and adaptive practices. I think trailing and refining projects with a long-term view of sustainability that do help. Integration, restoration into the life of mine planning, and that's very important from the start. Utilizing the correct initiatives in planning. Scaling successful models to enhance resilience and post-mining sustainability. Continuing collaborative with communities and stakeholders and share benefits. And like I said, also with government departments. And I want to leave you with that last quote. Restoration ultimately defines the legacy our generation will leave for the future. It involves reclaiming the value of natural resources. Preserving and restoration of natural resources in ecosystems is crucial for sustaining future rural livelihoods, considering the anticipated impact of climate change. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you very much, Arthur. You don't find many mining companies in the world who, does such kind of activities. I like your quote, proactive than reactive. So also, a lot of out-of-the-box thoughts and, your experiments, scaling it up from small to medium-sized, big. So really a nice model, which I haven't seen yet, even with the bigger players.
Thank you.
So you have navigated us through a lot of your projects. The bees effect on restoration, I liked it very much. Livelihood restoration. So closing the loop. So, and over a period of your operations, over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you're going to close the loop. So it's a sustainable project. So thank you very much. And showing you the mining company as the good guy, not the bad guy. So thank you very much. Now we will continue with the engagement with the communities, the interplay of revegetation and the community engagement. Robin Millet, she is the managing director and CEO of OMI Solutions from South Africa. And she, as a practitioner, will delve into what Arthur has just finished to continue on how she engages with the communities. And she will demonstrate how inclusive and participatory approaches amplify the social and environmental impact of revegetation efforts. So, Robin, thank you for coming, and please introduce yourself, and over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name's Robin Millet, and I initially was born in Zimbabwe, come from a farm, and being on a farm and being close to biodiversity has always been very close to my heart. But I'm going to take you today more through a journey of who we are as OMI Solutions. We have a research lab in South Africa where we look at alternative ways to do rehabilitation. But what's really important for us is how we deliver that rehabilitation. So our motto is powerful solutions, gentle delivery, and our focus is with the people, for the planet. So over the next 30 to 50 years, I think we're on a timeline which is ticking very, very fast. And the only way we're going to achieve our biodiversity and rehabilitation restoration is through and with the engagement of communities. So what we do is we have an inclusive approach, we understand the culture, we start to build trust, we empower people, and then we look at nature-based solutions that are economically diversified to actually link with the people on the ground. For me, out of the 17 SDGs, the most important SDG is SDG 3, prioritizing well-being. I'm going to take you through 3 case studies of why well-being is so important for us. It's important to look at financial well-being, occupational well-being, environmental well-being, mental well-being and learning, connection and relationships, and physical well-being and health. The reason why well-being is so important for me, there are 3 case studies that I was personally involved with over the years. The one was in 2018 in Kabul, Afghanistan, second in Soweto, South Africa, and then the third in Mbabashi, Kolwezi, and Matoshi in the DRC. In Afghanistan, I worked for a company called Wildlife Conservation Society. I flew in with 3 friends, and each of us had a dream. One of my friends was there to look at art and to preserve art. Another one of my friends was there to help women give healthy delivery or childbirth. My dream was to work in conservation. We were there to work with the snow leopard, and we were there to promulgate areas within Afghanistan to conserve the natural habitat. Very quickly, that changed. Within 2 days, I experienced my first bomb. Within 2 weeks, my closest friend was kidnapped. And all of a sudden, you realize life is very different on the ground. We were there to tell people that they had to conserve biodiversity, look after biodiversity, and not use the natural resources for their own well-being or their own life. Very quickly, we had our 4th bomb. And when you drive to work, you pass children in the street. And they're just doing what they do like in any other country. What we'd also see, we'd see them playing in the sky. So we lived in compounds, and in the afternoons, they would lift their kites and they would play across the different houses in the sky. And all of a sudden, this becomes real. There are small children next to us and experiencing a very horrific experience. In the DRC, we very much often work with illegal miners. And when we work with the illegal miners or artisanal miners, we walk amongst them, we speak to them, we interview them. In Soweto, I was working late at night. We had security with us, and a woman passed out. I phoned the ambulance and I asked, "Can you please come assist us?" And the people on the other side said, "It's too dangerous, we're not coming." And in that moment, I realized, when did people stop seeing people? When did they stop seeing the importance of a human being? In Kolwezi, DRC, I was very nearly arrested for taking a photo at an airport, and a complete stranger came out of nowhere to assist me. And when we drove away, I just remember thinking, I can't speak his language, I don't know his name, and how do I say thank you? So in mining, we go to a mining house, we'll look at a mining operation, and then we'll quantify the loss of biodiversity. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a typical mining operation, and we'll see 15 hectares, and we need to quantify how much biodiversity we need to actually bring back. But on the left, on your right, is influx. What we also have to quantify is the influx of people into an area. Now, the reason why I showed you the 3 case studies is typically we have numbers. So we'll say the influx is 3 times more or 4 times more, and the biodiversity net gain has to be 3 or 4 times more. But what I want you to remember is, in this influx, we deal with people. We deal with children. We deal with people with dreams. In every country that I've worked in, the one remaining topic, or the one thing that all of us can relate to, is we all have brothers, we all have sisters, we all have mothers, we all have fathers. We might have a different religion and we might speak a different language, but we're all from a family. In this photo, what do you see? And it's something Arthur actually made reference to in his presentation. In the DRC, a lot of people do excessive amount of burning, or they make charcoal to survive. In this photo, when we drove past, you just see a little boy pushing charcoal. If you think about it, he's maybe 12, 13, max 15. And he's been told that the only way for him to survive is to continue making charcoal, burning charcoal, selling charcoal. But how do we change this? The only way to change this is to collaborate with the people on the ground. These 3 men are very special and very dear to me. On the right is Christian. I worked with him in Matoshi. He doesn't speak English. I don't speak French. But we're both scientists, so we understand Latin. So we communicate using Latin words. At the top is Ben. He's from an operation called Komoa, a fantastic person who works with me and spends a lot of time in the DRC. And then there is Eric. Eric is completely passionate about the environment, especially medicinal plants. With these 3 men, I can safely move in the DRC. How do we then incorporate the culture and people surrounding us into our projects? The most important thing is skill matching. So instead of going to the ground and informing people, okay, you can be a fisherman, or you buy and sell charcoal, we actually have to start bringing hope back to the children on the ground. And that's making them realize that there's more than just using ecosystem services and that around you to survive. The second is building trust. How do you build trust? We build trust with spending a lot of time with community members, understanding their needs, asking them questions, and collaborating with them. A lot of times they have the solutions to our problems. And then empowering people. OMI have launched an innovator connector network where we identify young innovators and then we pull them into our projects. At the bottom, this is Margaret. We collect water bottle tops, melt that, and turn them into earrings. Next year, one of the mines in DRC, we're actually going to be melting bottle tops and turning those into buttons. So we have to go back to the ground, spend time with the children on the ground, and make them realize there's more to life than just using the ecosystem services around them. This photo is very dear to me. So when I spend time in the DRC, I spend a lot of time bush. I do a lot of research because we have a research lab in South Africa. This young man followed me one day, all day. He's a little fisherman, and I could not speak French, he could not speak English. But what really left me, and I think about him all the time, is that he's potentially a future scientist, and we're not spending enough time to help him become what he wants to become. So for us, as OMI, our motto is powerful solutions, gentle delivery. And gentle delivery for us is the most important component. SDG 3, good health and well-being should be at the forefront of collective efforts. Without prioritizing human well-being, we cannot achieve true sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Robin. So for this touching way of presenting your stories. And I know you have a very, very large multicultural, inclusive exposure and approach also towards supporting the land restoration activities. So I could see that here, the sensitive way of taking the things forward. So you bring back to the local communities to dream of their aspirations. You bring back hope. That's very important. So parallelly, the nature profits with that. So thank you for that impactful presentation. We move on to the next speaker. That's Danny Otto, a 30 years experienced restoration practitioner from one of the largest consulting companies worldwide, SLR Consulting, into designing and implementation of post-mining or land restoration projects. Danny, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and over to you.
Thank you, Dennis. Good work. So I think before we go into the technical side, the takeaway is, like we've heard some of the other speakers earlier, is keep planting and plant with purpose. Let's get seed in the ground. So this is just, phyto remediation is just an additional way of getting the maximum out of what we plant. So from the grandparents to the children that are planting, and from the projects that you've seen, just keep going, keep planting. And one of the examples we had on the way here, 25 billion trees planted by Ethiopia. That's what we want to hear. Those are the things we want to hear, and the messages coming here. So let's keep going in that regard. So phyto remediation, I'll give you a quick background. I'm not going to go too technical on it. We're basically using plants to prevent erosion, to prevent pollution, and to clean up while you plant. So some of these plants take up certain pollutants. With some of the constructed wetlands, we can actually change we can change acid into carbons and actually do carbon capture with different plants and different systems. The one point on this slide is just for some bedtime reading is a citizen's guide to phyto remediation by the US EPA that one can read on just to help. The main objective with pollution control in terms of planting to keep the pollution away from people. So we have a source, we have a pathway and a receptor, mostly people, all the environmental water systems. We want to plant to prevent the pollution from getting to the people, from getting to the resources. So that's the basic principle, and that's what we want to use the plants for. Back in the 80s, one of the biggest mining houses in the world started planting trees around their tailings facilities. Through the 90s, Chamber of Mines Vegetation Unit, this is quite specific to Southern Africa, but they then started doing specific work and research in terms of rehabilitation and planting, and then some bigger international companies planting trees, different professors and so on that went through this, and then ISCO, Harmony and so on, planting trees as we speak. ISCO doesn't exist anymore, but they did. They planted 1 million trees at one stage, and as I said, through to Ethiopia, 25 billion trees that they've planted. We've got some organizations that plant 1,000 trees a day in West Africa. That's what we want to see. And it's driven by the community, it's driven by the industry, it's driven by the government. So it's that platform we're after is like, how do we coordinate this? How do we get everything together? Started in the 80s with atom absorption spectrophotometering to see what metals there are. If you digest the vegetation material in acid, boil it up in acid, much easier nowadays. But anyway, we want to basically see what's in the plants, what do these plants collect. So that's quite important to get the information out, getting easier as we go. The other big thing there is within tailings, that's very acidic. From 1888, we got plants growing in a pH of 1.8. That is really super acidic, and sulfates of 50,000 milligrams per liter. That again is super saturated. And aluminium is normally the one toxin that plants can't tolerate. So we got trees growing in an area where you've got more than 1,500 milligrams per liter of aluminium. So these are eucalyptus trees on tailings dams. We started working on in the 80s. And they hyperaccumulate while growing in those conditions. They're hyperaccumulating cadmium, manganese, lead, zinc. Some of us like the lead up to 13 times more that's in the manganese that's in the water. So absorbing these, it's not what you want in your drinking water. You don't want that in your kids' food. So that's back from the 80s. The graphs, as you can see, the cadmium and the lead and the manganese being taken up through to the more nowadays. We've got these big databases in terms of what plants can accumulate, how they can prevent pollution, and just the main topics there in terms of phyto remediation. On the furthest left, arsenic, again, not something you want in your food, your water, your kids' waters. So we've got some plants that specifically accumulate arsenic. There's some nickel and cadmium there. I'll show you some nickel examples just now. Mercury, again, highly toxic, not something you want. Let's rather get it into the plants, get it out of the system, put it on a tailings dam. So the same there, aluminium, as I said earlier, uranium, again, not something you want in your water or your food, something that we have to deal with on a daily basis in sub-Saharan Africa, quite a lot of it, through to lead and cadmium. Lead replaces calcium in the bone and accumulates in the brain, not what you want, quite bad. And then just over to the databases. So online, really some strong information databases available nowadays, and just to see what accumulates where, what your problem is, and what you can actually plant in which areas, and that's global. This is a specific example around a smelter where nickel was one of the issues around the smelter fallout in the soil. This specific plant was found with the search for hyperaccumulators. It's endemic to the region where I grew up, but it's then grown and planted and fertilized. So you basically chase it to grow as fast as you can. So you can get three crops a year off it, and it accumulates specifically nickel and cadmium in this case, to the point where you can actually abstract the nickel. So there's the nickel from the plant, smelting it out and just getting the nickel out of the soil, out of the system, and actually extracting it becomes a resource. A quick one on a few examples here just across the globe in terms of different plants that accumulate different pollutants. So I'm not going to go into the detail. Again, just a few nasties. Mercury specifically standing out, and lead, and then just around Chernobyl as well, getting rid of some of the radionuclides. So that's a useful thing for us to know about, and a useful thing for the community to know about. A few more examples internationally, and Phragmites we touched on earlier with the constructed wetlands. Touching more on the wetlands here, we'll go into some of that just now. And just again, planting, not always easy. There's some equipment outside in the green zone where you'll see some augers where they can actually auger 5 holes at a time, as opposed to using a TLB and manual labor. Good to have manual labor, but often a challenge, as Robin will also tell you. And then just back from the 80s, around the tailings dam, the dark line you see are the trees that were planted in terms of retaining water and just help in terms of the spread of the pollution plume. Last slide, this is the largest constructed wetland in the world. I was involved in the largest constructed wetland in Africa, in Mali, that we built, but this is for specifically the oil industry, interestingly enough. The largest constructed wetland in the world for pollution control in Oman. And that's where we want to go. So using planting with purpose, using trees, vegetation, wetlands to treat water, to prevent pollution. And with that, we can just add the benefits of what we're planting for. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Danny. So thanks for the quick, explaining the evidence-based feasible approaches, what the restoration industry is right now doing, like photo remediation, the way cost-effective techniques, is being employed to detoxify and stabilize contaminants. So We are moving to the next speaker. She's Levan Carminati, again from the mining industry. She will be navigating the financial and logistical challenges to achieve equitable restoration practices. Levan will discuss and highlight innovative funding mechanisms, strategic partnerships, adaptive logistical solutions, and also the constraints of the mining industries. Levan, please introduce yourself and over to you.
Thanks, Dennis. And thank you for this opportunity to share some of our environmental and financial challenges, as well as the opportunities in respect to the rehabilitation and revegetation. As Dennis said, I'm Luann Carminati. I'm currently the CFO of a mining company, Sylvania Platinum, with operations in South Africa. I think the role of the CFO is traditionally numbers-based and numbers-driven, but that role has developed over the years, and I'd like to believe that it's become more of a value officer role, covering more than just the numbers in a financial statement. So, just a little bit about who Sylvania Platinum is. We produce platinum group metals in South Africa's platinum-rich bushveld complex through the retreatment of a mix of historical tailings dams and current arisings from our host chrome miners. We're also a joint venture partner with in a joint venture called the Taba JV. And this is a operation that is still under construction, but it will be a PGM and chrome producing operation with another mining partner. And then in addition to these operations, we also have 3 mining projects or mining rights that are currently in exploration phase. And these are in the same area as the Ivanhoe Platreef projects, although they're not Platreef. So mining has for a long time been a cornerstone of economic development, and particularly in the resource-rich regions of southern, central, and West Africa. However, we can't overlook the residual environmental footprint that deforested landscapes, disrupted ecosystems, and the displacement of communities that occurs as a result of the industry. And addressing these challenges is critical not only to restoring the integrity of our ecosystems, but also in achieving broader goals of sustainability, community development, and climate resilience. In the mining industry, we have an obligation to carry out tasks responsibly and effectively. The South African mining industry has evolved and is extensively regulated, and there are numerous laws that apply to, amongst other things, to mine rehabilitation. Mining companies that operate in South Africa also need to be aware of the aspects of the constitution of our Bill of Rights, which includes the right to an environment that is not harmful to people's health and well-being. I think a failure to recognize this as a mining company could result in severe reputational damage, which none of us want from an ethical point of view, as well as exposing companies to litigation. Our legislation in South Africa, much like that of other African countries with mature mining industries, requires mining companies to set aside funds for rehabilitation work throughout the life of each of the operations. The primary challenge in mine closure is accurately quantifying these environmental liabilities. And this is essential for the effective strategic planning of and managing stakeholder expectations, as well as securing the necessary financing. Without accurate databases, uncertainty can hamper this process and this progress and erode trust between communities, governments, and then private entities as well. At the end of 2022, the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources in South Africa estimated that there's about $5 billion that's already been invested in funds, in bank guarantees and cash deposits by mining companies to fund this rehabilitation, revegetation, and restoration at mine closure. These funds are invested over the life of the operation, but are only available at closure. And one of the issues is that the legislation requiring mines to invest these funds for closure and rehabilitation only came into effect a couple of decades ago after the advent of democracy in South Africa. And as we well know, the mining industry is significantly older than that, and mining has been taking place for over 150 years in South Africa. And for most of this time with limited regulation. So although $5 billion is a significant amount, it's not sufficient. When you look at the stats where they estimate about 6,100 mines are currently designated as derelict or ownerless, so not being rehabilitated by anyone. Unfortunately, dealing with this rests in the hands of the government, and their resources, much like existing mining companies, is also limited. Financial provisioning against closure liability is not a legal requirement in all countries. And in many African jurisdictions, such as Zimbabwe, there's no legislation for this. Many developing economies are constrained in terms of infrastructural development and funding capacity, and sustainable financing mechanisms such as green bonds, public-private partnerships, and more recently biodiversity credits are very underutilized and to a large extent not truly understood in the African countries. And also the high upfront costs tend to defer investment from outside Africa, especially in ecologically sensitive areas. And these are the areas that generally are highly prospective from a geological point of view. We also have the operational constraints to be managed. Geographic remoteness compounds logistical and labor costs, complicating rehabilitation efforts. Many mines are located in regions where unskilled labor is prevalent, and this necessitates significant investment in training for advanced rehabilitation techniques. We also suffer with the regulatory enforcement, where inconsistent environmental impact standards and inadequate oversight of financial guarantees which can significantly undermine the effectiveness of mine closure. Effectiveness of the rehabilitation is often at the discretion of individuals within the government and those representing government departments, so the outcomes are sometimes not quite in sync with the intention of the legislation. In addition to aligning rehabilitation projects with community needs and skills availability is a complex but crucial element of the process. And in countries such as Ghana and the DRC, artisanal miners also need to be factored into this consideration. So navigating the complex landscape of environmental regulation is one of the primary challenges in large-scale revegetation projects. And these projects can often require approvals from multiple government agencies, which each have their own set of rules and criteria, adding to the complexity. Post-closure of a mine site also requires monitoring in terms of the legislation, which is currently monthly for the first 6 months and then every 6 months for 2 years thereafter. But this obviously comes at an additional cost, and then there's the additional struggle of getting mine closure certificates from the authorities thereafter. So our rehabilitation efforts are intertwined with climate mitigation strategies, specifically with regard to reducing the carbon levels. As most of us know, a hectare of restored forest can reduce CO2 annually by between 5 and 10 tons, showcasing the potential for revegetation as a climate solution. However, it's a balancing act of managing the implementation of innovative climate solutions with the cost associated with that. So I've mentioned a lot of challenges and problems with regard to revegetation and financing it and the cost thereof. And despite these challenges, I do think we should be focusing on the benefits of revegetation, and these include, just briefly, the obvious environmental benefits, where rehabilitation transforms barren landscapes into thriving ecosystems, and the economic opportunities that come with the rehabilitation, where it creates employment for local communities, both during and after closure plans and phases. And in some cases, rehabilitated land becomes part of ecotourism or sustainable agriculture, generating long-term economic benefits. It's also a strengthening of the community well-being, where rehabilitation and visible progress improves relations and local communities and fosters investor confidence. This is one area where concurrent rehab can benefit communities, where you, with early projects, building good relationships between the mining companies and the communities. So at Sylvania, we operate under the mandate of our host mines currently, ensuring that our environmental responsibilities are fulfilled. Our approach to managing our tailings dams specifically provides a model for balancing operational needs with our environmental stewardship. So the key features of our tailings facilities design and rehabilitation approach just briefly include the consolidation and reduced footprint. So by remining the host mines, tailings dams and facilities, we are taking these smaller historical dumps and depositing these on more modern, environmentally approved tailings facilities, which assists in reducing the footprint and thereby reducing the rehabilitation requirements at the end of life of mine. We also utilize geotechnical and hydrological testing, which ensures that tailings dams are stable and resilient against seismic risks. Comprehensive drainage systems prevent groundwater contamination through advanced subsurface and above liner drainage. The installation of water monitoring systems, which enables continuous monitoring of water tables, which is critical in maintaining stability. Obviously, structural integrity with starter walls and the use of underflow wedges to ensure stability of the tailings dams. And then proactive rehabilitation and planning, where we are initiating rehabilitation programs early and running these concurrent to our operations, ultimately reducing the financial requirements on closure. As part of Sylvania's commitment to responsible tailings and environmental management, the companies collaborated with Robin and her team at OMI to conduct innovative tailings rehabilitation trials on some of our company's tailings dams. These trials aim at developing sustainable, cost-effective methods of environmental restoration by using organic amendments to promote revegetation, addressing the limitations of traditional approaches, which are more costly and have their own environmental challenges. We're also exploring opportunities with NGO partners and to create a safe space for the succulents seized under law enforcement, as there's a growing illegal succulent trade currently in South Africa. And then we are also in the process of doing research on utilizing biocoal to produce pellets from chrome fines to be used in the smelting process. So essentially what I'm trying to demonstrate is that operational functionality and environmental rehabilitation are not mutually exclusive. They can be, in fact, run in parallel and be mutually reinforcing. Corporates should be using strategic partnerships to develop cost-effective solutions for revegetation and land rehabilitation. And the projects don't always need to be of a grand scale. Start small and scale these up. The initial cost will undoubtedly reduce the final liability. So to amplify the success of projects like that at Sylvania and to address the broader challenges of mine rehabilitation, it's essential that we use innovative financing models that are such as green bonds, carbon credits, public-private partnerships, and biodiversity credits that offer pathways to fund larger scale rehabilitation and revegetation. An example of this is when we use revenue from carbon credits that can be reinvested in local communities, supporting education and healthcare initiatives alongside ecological restoration. The use of blended financing strategies can reduce high initial costs, and companies are not restricted to only using one method of financing. We also need to try and align the national regulatory frameworks across regions such as the SADC and Central Africa, harmonized standards for environmental impact assessments, financial provisioning, and rehabilitation plans can reduce the complexity of compliance, ensuring more efficient project and execution. So stakeholder collaboration, I think, is key. We need governments, we need mining companies, we need non-government organizations, and we need local communities to all be working together. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And transparent communication and shared accountability to ensure rehabilitation efforts are both inclusive and effective. So I think we can all agree that the future of our landscapes depends on the actions that we take today. Mining is undeniably integral to economic development, but the legacy must not be one of degradation and desolation. Through responsible rehabilitation and revegetation and innovative financing, we can transform degraded lands into thriving ecosystems and support biodiversity as well as uplift communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Levan. So, as you said, mining will increase in the next coming years, 4 times, 6 times more. So it is very imperative that whatever you have said and whatever you are doing, it's highly commendable. And I repeat, there are hardly mining companies who take care of the nature in such a way like Sylvania Platinum and Ivanhoe. So thank you also for opening up a bit on your challenges and complexities, your financial constraints, your regulatory constraints. For example, your bonds getting blocked and huge cash flow is getting blocked. I know for a fact that the pricings of the products are not good at this juncture. So there are so many constraints when it comes to restoration and financing restoration. So thank you for giving that holistic view, Levan. And I thank you all the speakers for contributing to your thoughts and your actions. I would like to ask the public for questions, and we will then move on to a discussion. Please.
Yes, This goes for all of you because I did not get what I was expecting. Because if we are replacing what we have destroyed as corporate responsibility, mindful of the fact that revegetation is a challenging phenomenon whilst projects have closed. Because prior to the start of the project, there is an impact assessment being done that says what you want to do in events where there are environmental challenges. But for a company that does not have an exit strategy, that is where the problem comes in. That is where we start to see revegetation becoming a very pivotal challenge in addressing environmental issues. So, if a company is to start and the modalities for its operation by government is to do an impact assessment survey or study in the operational area where the company will desire to start. And then as an offshoot of short engagement, what we call free, prior, and informed consent, mostly by the companies, they work with governments and the local actors, leaving the communities with no free, prior, and informed consent. And then during the operational situations, we'll see an emergence of depletion of the environment. You know, you see destruction, you see deforestation, logging, a number of it as a negative intervention on the side of the company. Now, what can a company do in the event where there is no exit strategy? And then when that company has folded up, we start to see environmental destruction.
Thank you very much. Do you have a specific question more? No. This was a statement, right? Yes. So we will cover that. Danny?
I can try and answer. I do agree with you. It's a step beyond the exit strategy. So it's not just closure, it's not just rehabilitation funds. The exit strategy and the whole planning from the beginning with closure in mind, the cradle to grave concept is really critical. I know the area where you come from, we discussed just now a bit earlier. So I do agree with that, really important. And I think what's important there is to take it beyond the government level. So we're sort of looking at a global structure, a platform, like this one, like G20, like the United Nations, I'm just using as an example, like the rehabilitation societies and NGOs like yours, that can independently look at this and assist. So just a platform where everybody has a voice, but somebody coordinates it, that it's not one government talking, it's a regional thing, because often you're close to the border of another country, more regional, bigger picture of it, and almost a global platform where we can discuss and make sure that there's a viable exit strategy, that everyone sees it as that, not just the company, because the company has an objective, but the community also has a voice.
Thank you, Danny. Please.
Bon, okay. I don't speak very well English, but I want to yes. Ok, merci. Je suis Fidel Milizi. Je viens de la République démocratique du Congo. Je suis de la communauté autochtone Batwa.
I'm from autochtone community of Batwa.
Je suis content de toutes les présentations.
I'm very happy about all the presentations.
Mais je vais me focaliser sur les présentations qui sont réalisées au niveau de la RDC.
But I want to focus only on presentation done at the DRC.
Ok, ma première préoccupation.
My first concern
concerne le nombre d'hectares restaurés après l'exploitation minière.
My first concern is about the number of hectares restored after mining exploitation.
Parce que je travaille beaucoup sur la restauration écologique.
I work a lot on the ecological restoration.
Mais aussi, la deuxième chose, je voudrais savoir s'il y a des plans ou des plans spécifiques pour les peuples autochtones pygmées qui sont autour de ces gisements miniers ou de ces gisements miniers auxquels vous exploitez.
My second concern, I'd like to know if there is any specific plan for pygmy people living around these mining exploitations.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Can I?
I think this can, yes, I was about to say, Robin can.
So I share the same concern as you. What we have seen, especially in the last 5 years, is huge loss of biodiversity. Part of it is due to mining. Part of it is due to influx of people coming towards the mines. And then the other component is a huge amount of burning taking place for charcoal. And then we also see poaching. So there's not a lot of mammals, especially with the burning. They're pushing out the smaller animals. So we're seeing a lot of loss of fauna, smaller animals. So the mines that we're working with now, there are two components that we're focusing on. One is better and improved waste management. So we're repurposing waste to start building incubator nurseries. We're keeping the incubator nurseries really small, and we are focusing on germinating plants at a really rapid pace. So we're germinating plants up to 2,000 plants with a turnaround time of 2 months. We're also looking at doing these incubator nurseries in specific habitat types. In the DRC, you have the most incredible habitats. They actually change very quickly. So you're seeing like 5 different habitats, and then you're seeing transitional phases inside those habitats. So I think we're losing a lot of vegetation on the riparian zone right next to the river because a lot of the communities are actually also farming in that zone. And then we have delungas and critical habitat that we're losing at a high pace. But I do know the mining houses that we're working with now are really focusing on those incubator nurseries. So we're very concerned, and also know that we cannot do this without community collaboration. And that's why you saw in my presentation, we spend so much time with the community. And the biggest hurdle was actually language. So we move with translators to help us collaborate better with them.
Thank you, Robin. Considering the time, we have 10 more minutes, so I want to quickly move and ask some of the questions from my side. Is there any audience question more? Daniel.
Thank you for putting together a panel specific on mining, and thank you for your presentation. I want to ask the professionals that have been working in restoration and revegetation. We all know that this is a complex problem, and it takes a long time, and it's really, really difficult to do. So as professional working in this area for many years, what technologies are you missing? What would you like to see on your toolbox in order to accelerate that process? Thank you.
What is missing? You want to say something, Harriet?
Yeah, thanks. So I think the monitoring is very dear to my heart. And I think that being able to really see the fruits of integrating remote sensing, real-time monitoring with machine learning and AI algorithms that can actually let us move away from having sample-based approach that has the inherent variability and inaccuracies that come with that. You know, statistically, it's very difficult to deal with, to actually being able to monitor the entirety of systems. And from that, I mean everything from, if you look at the foundational pyramid of rehabilitation, so starting off at the geotechnical phase, then moving into soil chemistry, then vegetation, soil carbon, habitat complexity. So being able to really actively integrate at high levels of accuracy that kind of data, I think what we've seen today and across many of the other presentations is we're moving in that direction, but we're not quite there yet. But once we're there, really having embraced technology will change, I guess, our whole decision-making framework and hopefully make us more accurate, enable us to plan better, to have lower risk, and to be more cost-effective so that we can more efficiently employ more resources to really up the scale and up our levels of success.
Yes, technology. Danny may be having
Thanks.
an
Yes.
idea.
I think additives for one, water retention, we spoke about this, but also so in terms of microbes, getting microbes in, so those would be like main things, genetics in terms of germination, technology and improving that, I think will really help just getting seed in the ground and getting better germination, better growth, better carbon capture, diversity.
Thank you. Shiko?
Danny, I'd like to know when it comes to TSF restoration, tailing storage facility, do you have a specific type of vegetation or it depends on the type of metal contained in the TSF? Is there any common one you can plant everywhere or you need to find out what kind of metal you've got in the TSF for you to do the revegetation?
The first objective is to stabilize the tailings so that we don't have erosion, and then for that probably mostly, yes, a cynodon, a specific species, a creeper grass species. Then we look at what's there. So if it is lead and manganese, we would go for a eucalyptus species. If it is something else, more than the platinum, then we might go for another species. So we are species specific in terms of what gets taken up. And we've got a fair idea of what's in gold tailings, what's in platinum tailings, what's in diamond tailings. So from there we take it and then add the specific species, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One last question from my side. So, how do you measure success, long-term sustainability in revegetation or as well as in general context, the land restoration initiatives? Maybe this question is directed to the mining companies. Arthur.
Yeah, Dennis, I mean, it's for us, we're still young. But if you ask me how we will measure it, is that communities in the area was depending on the environment for their livelihood. Is that once post mining, that community can still exist and still have a livelihood on the environment. And I think that we can assist with in the restoration process, but not just the disturbance that the mine caused, but also people living in that area, making it a post-mining sustainable community.
Okay, thank you. I heard from the mining company's perspective the constraints and the hurdles. I heard the technological or techniques like phytoremediation, etc. I would also like to ask the restoration companies, as a business model, do you actually, can you live with the restoration as a business? Is it a viable method of creating livelihood for your own companies?
I think if you can focus on the sustainability of the person and the well-being of the person, so you might not always achieve massive margins as businesses, but to ensure that people that are on the ground can stay there and can continue living, I think then you're providing something more sustainable.
Andrea, you want to add?
Perhaps if I can add to that, I think I'm very excited about the future in this regard, in that I think there's an appreciation that we need to move beyond the compliance mindset and more to a stewardship mindset. And from a restoration perspective, we need to, while in the last few years of the mining operations, we need to be really generating data on what the socioeconomic benefits of the final land uses are. What are the yields of crops? What is the benefits to communities? What are the number of jobs created before we get to that final decommissioning and closure date? And it's complex in that we need to bring the communities on board with this. But on the other hand, that gives a lot of opportunity because mining companies do take community needs seriously for the most part. And as restoration practitioners, if we can empower the communities, especially with helping to build their own legacy, I think that's really what makes me excited about where the future is going.
Thank you. Danny, you will add something?
Thank you. Yeah, I think to answer, it's feasible, but on every continent there's a handful of rehabilitation experts or companies. That's about it. So in spite of the billions in the rehabilitation funds, we're not seeing this growth, but with, I think, the future ahead, we'll hopefully have that more and more people get involved, especially the young people becoming more involved in rehabilitation and restoration.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's exactly what we are also trying to do here at G20 Global Land Initiative, to create, nurture more and more restoration experts, starting from the smaller ages till to the elderly and disabled people. Also, they commit also to the land restorations. Thank you very much for joining and taking the time and your effort all the way from South Africa to Saudi Arabia. And due to the time constraints, I'm stopping here. Once again, thank you very much.